Hi everyone, my name is Antonia and this is Perry Pictures. Today's tutorial will be on how to draw anatomy and it comes by request. There are 3 ways that I like to draw anatomy for my characters and I will show you all 3 of them, and I hope that these techniques will be helpful to you for your drawings. And I'm also going to include advice on what not to do from personal experience. Let's go ahead and start with the first one, which is gesture drawing. Gesture? Well, it kind of does require some guesswork to fill in the blanks. For example, my first illustration of Amelia from my Midsummer Magic Month storybook challenge video, where I was able to draw her just using sort of a stick figure-esque technique. I think this technique is most useful in the moments when you have a very strong mental picture already established in your mind of what it is that you are trying to draw, or you are looking to establish a very powerful active pose that is going to read well. This method leans very heavily on the use of a line of action. So let's go ahead and start with the line of action. So we're gonna go ahead and do like this, a little bit of a flick of the wrist, and we will add our head up here on top of that. So we're going to assume that the body is all leaning this way. So for the head, I'm also going to give us some directional lines here to establish where the face is, and right here in the middle is kind of where the nose is pointing, and the body is sort of leaning chest out. So what we can do from here really is establish that we have shoulders going this way. They're kind of like slanting with the head, and the hips are going to slant the opposite direction. And the rest kind of just becomes a stick figure on top of that. So let's go ahead and build our stick figure on top of that. We'll start with our shoulders. Let's say he's got this arm sort of just thrown up in the air behind his head. Same thing with this other arm, because this is just a leap into the air kind of drawing. And then we'll do the hips so we can figure out where our legs are. Now personally, I like to create a little bit of a triangle here because that kind of shows you where the pelvis is, and then your thighs are gonna kind of come off of these curved lines. And I'm gonna go ahead and establish that our legs are bending back. They've got their knees kind of folded back behind them. And the thing about drawing the gesture lines is you kind of want to give quick flicks and edit, undo, and redo as many times as you need to, especially if you're working in digital. If you're working pencil on paper, you might want to draw these very lightly at first until you get sort of the movement that you want. But again, this is most useful when you're drawing poses with a lot of movement. All right, so we have our character now. This is our pose. I like to add my hands. And the way I do that is I draw kind of this shape right here. It's a little bit of like a wilted diamond. And the reason why I draw it this way is because to me, this is basically the shape of the palm of the hand. If you come up here, you've got this space right here from thumb to pointer finger, and then you've got this area right here. And then again, it comes back down here. So I've kind of created this wilted diamond shape, and the wilted side, the crescent side, is going to be right here from thumb to forefinger. And the reason why we draw this shape is because that shape is always consistent. Your hand is going to be that shape no matter what pose you make. So if I'm doing a peace sign, right, with my hand, I'm still going to have this shape. It's still going to come down here and sort of bow out from my finger and then come back up. So we've got this sort of diamond shape no matter what pose your hand is making. Same thing with the fist. The palm really doesn't change so much. The fingers can create a lot of different shape language, but the palm isn't going to change on you. So that is why I like to sort of rough in that shape. Sometimes, particularly if I'm using this gesture style, I'll just draw little triangles for the feet. So now that I've dropped the layer opacity, I'm gonna go ahead and draw in here a character. So let's go ahead and do that now. I will pick a different pen. Let's go ahead and put a nose right there on that mark where I indicated earlier there would be a nose. This is our directional marking, and this character is extremely happy. He's jumping for joy, so we're gonna go ahead and give him a nice big smile. Give him a face and an ear and some hair. nice little cap for him. Now this absolutely isn't required, but one of the things that I am doing right now is I'm creating a different layer per sort of grouped section of the body, and I will collapse them all once I am satisfied with them and with the proportions. Already I can tell that the arms and the legs are not proportionate at all, and that is one of the things that I find most tricky with this style, is making sure that your proportions are correct. But knowing that going into this, I do like to draw these body parts on separate layers. So here on this layer, I have the legs. That way, if the legs end up being too long for the rest of the body, which I already believe they're going to be, I can make that adjustment just to that one layer without affecting the proportions of the rest of the body. And there we have it. So we do have a character on top of our gesture lines now. There's obviously some shaky handiwork here with the line art, with the hands, but overall the method worked really well. The second method that we are going to cover today is going to be the block in bubble method. This is one that you may have seen other artists use. This is the one that I used most frequently. And again, there are examples of this all over my YouTube channel where I'm fleshing out a character's anatomy using this technique. It's exactly how I did it for my BitLife videos. This is how I drew my character for my redraw in 2020. This is also what I used when I was doing my art fight videos at the very beginning of my YouTube channel. And so this is the technique that I tend to lean on the most, and we're gonna go through why I find this method in particular so useful and what the benefits are to using this style. First of all, let's go ahead and talk about what that means. Block and bubble method. I do know that there are some people who prefer to draw their characters using exclusively one or the other. Wow, these are bad. I am going to teach you the block and bubble method, which is a combination of these two. And I tend to draw a circle for a head, but then I actually end up adding a triangle for the jaw. There are certain features in the human body that lend themselves better to one shape and other features that lend themselves better to another. And for the body cavity, the upper torso, tend to go with a bit more of a circular shape than a block shape. You may have noticed in some of my other videos that I like to draw a bit of a figure 8. So when I will draw these, I will kind of do one of these numbers, depending on which way your character is facing. And in this case, based on this guideline here, right down the center of the face, the character is facing this direction. So what is that figure 8 useful for? That is the rib cage. The second half that comes under, that is the side of the rib cage leaning away from camera. So let's assume here for a moment that we're seeing this plane of the body. What would be this character's left side? So we're going to see the left side of the neck, the left side of the torso, the left side of the face. This figure 8 symbol runs right through the center of that. The reason why we do this is because the human torso has the rib cage up here. The spine kind of goes like this. And then we have this open cavity here. Now I've seen some artists will teach the bubble method using a singular line for the neck and a singular line for the spine, and then draw their hips down here. What I tend to do here is I will actually fill this space in with a circle. There's more than just a spine there. We have our entire stomach there. We have the rest of our organs there. There is more to the body cavity than just the heart and the lungs up in the rib cage. What I worry will happen if I draw a character without that circle is that I will come over here with my rib cage and with my spine, with my hips, and when I go to draw the character on top of that, what I might end up doing, or what someone else might end up doing, is using this spine as a lead line and drawing their character looking like this. It's a little bit unsettling, to be honest, if the belly pinches in so much so that the only thing that could possibly exist in that space is the character's spine and nothing else. It seems a little bit alien. I don't believe that that is necessarily a good anatomical practice. So I do tend to recommend that when you draw, that you include in there another circle right around the spine for the stomach, right under the figure 8 for the rib cage. And I think that this is really useful information. This is a really useful indicator that no matter what pose you are drawing, whether they are just simply standing like I am doing currently, or if they're doing something much more complicated, you'll always sort of know where to put that because you will stay inside this body cavity here. So if this character, if this is, say, the inside, right? That ball is gonna kind of fit right under the shadow of that space. So the next important thing that I would like to talk about is the hips, and the reason why I use a square to draw the character's hips rather than a circle. And the reason for this is because I want to make sure that I am including enough space for 3 different things. And those 3 things are the pelvis, the left thigh, and the right thigh, by drawing a triangle here in the center, which kind of gives us 2 other triangles off to the side. Triangle 1, 2, 3. 1 and 3 are for the legs, and 2 is for the pelvis area, and I think that it's really important that we include all 3 of these body parts. I think too often we end up giving a character either too much pelvis, and the legs end up looking kind of like this, or we may end up giving a character little to virtually no pelvis, and then the outfits, once drawn on top of that, can end up looking like they don't really make a whole lot of sense. So if we're drawing some jeans on these thick thighs, we've essentially created a seam that cuts into the body in a very uncomfortable way when the waistline of the pants is right here, and then the pelvis ends right here. It just makes it look like these jeans are cutting directly into the body, because realistically, the pelvis should end down here. So if we are, say, looking at the back of the character, we would have a proper booty here. This would all be booty. But when we don't have enough pelvis, this is how much booty your character has. So even though we have ourselves a very square hip region, we are still going to use circles or bubbles for the legs, bubbles for the knees. So let's go ahead and include some bubbles for those. And I'm going to bubble in our calves and our ankles as well. So for the feet, we could try the triangle thing again, or we could give ourselves a little bit better of a guide in this stage by drawing more of this kind of shape, where we don't point the toes nearly as much. Okay, we're nearly there. We're nearly done here. So let's go ahead and draw in our shoulders. I like to use circles for shoulders because they are sort of a rounded part of the body. And then again, like with the legs, I give the arms a circular shape, the elbow, the wrist, and the hand, once again in that same old diamond shape that I told you about. Draw this back in very quickly. Basically, yes, this is our block and bubble method. Well, let's go ahead and start. And I will, again, start with the nose here because why not? And then let's add the character's ear. I like to draw the ears kind of after the nose, and that is because the ear starts and ends along the lines that the nose begins and ends. So that's a great way to sort of line up the ears on your character's face, is to just try and imagine a band across the face, right across the nose, and that's where your ears are gonna kind of connect. These lines that we did earlier with the cranium and the triangle should inform the shape of the face. All right, let's add some hair to our character here. I'm gonna go ahead and give our character a bit of a ponytail. Since I am drawing a female character now, there's something that I definitely didn't mention before, and that is the placement of breast on the character. What I find is useful is to reference your figure 8 line here where they come up and sort of touch the sternum, which is that center point in the front of the figure 8, where you're gonna wanna sort of put this character's female anatomy. So if you're wondering how far down to go, how far up to go, the center arch in particular is a great place marker for that. Here's another tip that I have for you as far as using this or even the stick figure method, where you are marking your character's elbows at the convergence of the stick figure's arms. You want the natural waist of the character, which is that ending spot for the stomach here. This is your natural waist, where the circle for the stomach ends. Use that as the elbow placement. So if this character were to relax her arm, that elbow should come down and relax right at the natural waist of the character. But since she has her elbows bent and lifted, they rise a little bit higher. But if we were to take that elbow, and let's just go ahead and swing that so that it rests naturally. So again, this pivot point hasn't changed. This is the same point. So I just pivoted this down and the elbow falls right on the natural waist. And that's a good way to know if the arms are too long or too short. You really want that elbow to land on the natural waist, and your forearms and your biceps should be essentially the same length. And this method is really great for more detailed style character anatomy, and it is better for proportions control, whether you are exaggerating proportions to do something that is going to have a lot of caricature in the body, or whether you are trying to maintain a more realistic style. The shoulder's not lifting up here where the shoulder should be. So let's go ahead and make a small adjustment here. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at what we've got here. Now this is not a strong pose, but we are going to go ahead and complete her as is. Okay, so this is where separating the thighs from the pelvis really matters, because again, we don't want to mark our pelvis too high up and have the seam of the pants go any higher than where it should. So I'm gonna add one more layer and add our legs in here. Oh, my wrist is hurting. I apologize for that. I had to run and get my wrist wrap. This isn't one of those artist gloves that a lot of people have. I believe that's to stop from accidentally doing this with your hands, but my hand just started hurting, and so I wear this to help me with wrist pain. I apologize that mine looks a little bit busted. I do have some paint on here because I was painting the walls. So back to what we were doing here with our block and bubble character. Things that will help make your limbs look worlds and worlds better is going to be studying references and getting really familiar with the curve of the limbs of the body. The fact that the shin tends to be very straight, but then the calf muscle tends to be very curved, things like that. Same thing with your arms. You're gonna have a very straight edge here for the forearm, but then a very curved line here for the muscle of the forearm. Not going all in on the faces today because I really wanted to work on anatomy. The penmanship isn't the best, but here's our character using the block and bubble method. And if I go ahead and turn back on this layer, we can see the underlying anatomy that we drew with that method. The third method is using silhouettes, and the benefit to using the silhouette method is that it has great visual readability and strong character design if you're in the character design phase. I've used this silhouette style before in my outfit of the day video. I also used this when filling in the villagers for my Midsummer Magic Month Part 3 video. I really prefer to go in and grab a paintbrush that has a little bit more thickness. If you're able to draw with pressure sensitivity, it is also really good to have one that has some pressure sensitivity to it. And I'll be able to point out why as we go along. This method is particularly helpful when you are trying to design a character for the first time. It helps you to develop a really strong silhouette and shape language for your characters. And it is also really great for visual readability if you have a very busy scene and you want to make sure that your character has a really strong presence. The silhouette method is particularly good for those two reasons. So I'm going to go ahead and start by just kind of chucking in some shading here, some different colors and some dark shapes, kind of have in mind that I want to have a character who's kind of looking back over their shoulder. And then for some good shape language, I'm going to go ahead and thrust the hip back like this so that I'm getting this really strong sort of line of action going here. Running out of canvas space to add some legs, so I'm gonna go ahead and move that up there and shrink it a little bit to give myself a little bit more room to work. I'm gonna throw this leg back really far because I really just want to have really strong body language. What if we threw this leg back and did sort of like a Sailor Moon, a very Sailor Moonish pose, right? Like we just get like this little foot going here, and then here we'll be up on our toe, right? Again, we have this really strong line of action as if this character is sort of just like running forward really fast. So we're leaning into it, the head is leaning into it. I do want to draw it as if the face is sort of looking back though. So here we have it. So this is more of like a silhouette method of filling in your character's anatomy and really just developing the pose that you want. So we have our pose now with this silhouette here. So I'm gonna go ahead now and, like I did with the previous ones, turn the opacity down and create a new layer to do my line art on top of. I'm gonna start with the elbow actually because I wanna make sure that this accessory I've added is going to work. So we're gonna go ahead and give this character some really puffy sleeves here. And for this backpack, I'm gonna go ahead and backpack's gonna run through, whoops. The strap is gonna run over the shoulder, through the hand here, and to the backpack. So this is what we have, and then it's gonna come off the other end of the hand. And then we have sort of like this backpack. We have the character's face. You can see a little bit of a jaw here in the silhouette. And so this is really good too. This is where the opaqueness of the lines you're throwing down, it'll help you to sort of discover these different shapes in here. In a bit of a long, wide shirt. Maybe they're poofy pants like this. So there is a bit of a kind of a discovery phase when it comes to using this silhouette language for your character's anatomy. You're really sort of just reading the ink blots almost. We'll give this one a bit of a widow's peak on the hairline. Here we go. So now we have a character that was done using the silhouette method. So let's go ahead and align them all up. So that's basically the 3 different methods that I've used to draw my poses and anatomy for my characters. And I have different reasons for using each one of them, whether it's the gesture lines, the block and bubble, and the silhouette versions. But once you get this down or become familiar, there is the added benefit of combining these 3 different techniques, the gesture lines, the block and bubble, and the silhouette. And can really create some interesting anatomy and characters with even more abnormal features. All right, and I think that is everything that I have for you today. I really hope that this video was helpful for you and that you were able to take something away from this that is gonna help you in your future. If you have any questions for me, or if you have any suggestions in general that you would like to add to this content, please leave them in the comments down below. So that said, if you liked this video, go ahead and like this video. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing because I am always creating art and animation content on my YouTube channel all the time. And I will see you next time. Bye.